June 1943. A warehouse in New Jersey. An Army general walks through the door and stops dead in his tracks. On the floor in front of him lies a massive pile of deflated rubber that looks like it came from a circus tent. "This is your secret weapon?" he asks, barely containing his laughter. The engineer standing next to the pile doesn't say a word. He just walks over to a corner and flips a switch. An air compressor roars to life. The sound echoes through the empty warehouse like a mechanical beast waking up. Slowly, the rubber begins to move. It inflates, takes shape. Within 15 minutes, standing before them is a perfect M4 Sherman tank. 40 tons of American steel and firepower, except this one weighs less than 100 pounds and cost $85 to make. The general circles around it slowly, running his hand along the rubber surface. From up close, you can tell it's fake. But from 200 yards away, even he has to admit he couldn't tell the difference. "How much does a real tank cost?" he asks quietly. $45,000, the engineer replies. The general does the math in his head. For the price of one real Sherman tank, they could build 529 fake ones, an entire phantom army for the cost of a single battalion. "How many of these can you make?" the general asks. The engineer smiles. "As many as you need to lie to Hitler." This is the birth of the Ghost Army. 1,100 artists, designers, and sound engineers who would become the most successful con artists in military history. Their mission is simple but insane. Make the Germans believe American armies exist where they don't. Draw enemy divisions to empty fields. Protect real soldiers with imaginary ones. The Germans would call them ghosts, because you can't kill what isn't real. Fall 1943. Army recruitment centers across America received the strangest orders they've ever seen. Find us artists, fashion designers, Broadway set designers, sound engineers from Hollywood radio studios. The recruiters are completely confused. "Sir, we're fighting a war. We need soldiers who can shoot rifles, not paint pictures." The commanding officer looks at them coldly. "We need magicians." Bill Blass walks into a recruitment office in New York. He's 21 years old, studying fashion design. Within a week, he's wearing an Army uniform. Ellsworth Kelly is 20 years old, studying painting at the Pratt Institute in Brooklyn. He gets his draft notice and reports for duty. Art Kane is 19, working as a photographer's assistant. The Army needs him too. These men can't march in formation. They argue with officers about color theory and lighting angles. Some of them have never held a rifle before. But they can paint a tank so realistically that Luftwaffe pilots flying overhead at 3,000 feet can't tell it's made of rubber and canvas. January 20th, 1944. Camp Forest, Tennessee. The 23rd Headquarters Special Troops officially activates. Colonel Harry Reeder stands before them in a cold tent and delivers the strangest briefing any of them have ever heard. "You are now the Ghost Army. Your weapons are deception, illusion, and theater. You will save thousands of American lives, but understand this. If you are captured by the Germans, they will execute you as spies, not treat you as prisoners of war. There will be no Geneva Convention for you." The tent goes completely silent. Some of the men look at each other nervously. Others stare straight ahead, processing what they just heard. "Any questions?" Reeder asks. A private in the back raises his hand slowly. "Sir, do we get combat pay?" Reeder almost smiles. "You'll be closer to enemy lines than most infantry units. What do you think?" For the next 4 months, they train in ways no other unit has ever trained, learning to inflate 40-ton rubber tanks in 15 minutes in the middle of the night. Recording real tank sounds on portable equipment, creating fake radio traffic that sounds exactly like real military communications, studying how magicians create illusions, then applying those techniques to warfare. By June 1944, they're as ready as they'll ever be. D-Day happens, the invasion of Normandy succeeds, and the Ghost Army ships across the Atlantic to France. But nobody, not even them, knows if rubber tanks and recorded sounds can actually stop German bullets. July 1944. Normandy, France, 6 weeks after D-Day. General George Patton has a problem. His Third Army is about to break out of the hedgerow country and race across France toward Paris. But he needs to hide his true direction from German intelligence. If the Germans figure out where he's going, they'll move their reserves to block him. Enter the Ghost Army, their first real combat mission. The plan is deceptively simple. Make the Germans think Patton is heading toward the port city of Brest in Brittany to the west when he's actually going to smash east toward Paris. July 29, 1944. Midnight. The Ghost Army convoy rolls through the French countryside with their headlights off. They arrive at fields near the town of Brest and begin their work in complete darkness. Within hours, 96 inflatable Sherman tanks appear in fields that were empty at sunset. They position them carefully so German reconnaissance planes will spot them at dawn. Bulldozers drag chains and logs behind them, creating fake tank tracks in the mud that lead to the positions. Then comes the sound show. 5 half-tracks equipped with massive 500-pound speaker arrays park just 300 meters from known German positions, close enough that the Germans can hear individual voices if someone speaks too loudly. At 2 a.m, they start playing the recordings, real tank engines recorded at Fort Knox, Kentucky, the sound of treads clanking over hard ground. Gears shifting, radio chatter, officers shouting orders to move armor into attack positions. German soldiers in their trenches peer into the darkness, trying to see what's making all that noise. They can hear it clearly. Dozens, maybe hundreds of tanks massing for an assault. German commanders send urgent reports back to headquarters. Americans are concentrating massive armor near Brest. Main attack coming in this sector. German high command responds immediately. They rush reinforcements toward Brittany. 10,000 soldiers, tank battalions, artillery units, all rushing to stop Patton's supposed main thrust toward Brest. Meanwhile, Patton's real army, 200 miles to the east, encounters almost no resistance. They smash through weak German defenses and cover 400 miles in 2 weeks, one of the fastest armored advances in military history. By the time German intelligence figures out they've been tricked, it's far too late. Patton is already at the German border, and most of the German army in France is destroyed or in retreat. The Ghost Army's first mission is a complete success. Cost? $8,160 in rubber tanks and equipment. Result? Helped destroy the German army in France and saved thousands of American lives. Nobody's laughing at inflatable tanks anymore. August 20th, 1944, Brest, France. The Ghost Army faces their most dangerous mission yet. And this time, they won't just be near the battlefield, they'll be in it. The port city of Brest is under siege. 38,000 German soldiers defend it, commanded by General Hermann Bernhard Ramke, a fanatical Nazi officer who has publicly declared he will never surrender. The American forces surrounding the city need the Germans to think they're facing a massive armored assault, so the real attack can come from a different direction. The Ghost Army gets the call. Create 2 fake tank battalions, draw German fire to the flanks, allow the real American infantry to attack the center. August 23rd. The rubber tanks go up. 53 inflatable Shermans positioned near the village of Curlin, right on the edge of the active combat zone. Corporal Jack Macy from Brooklyn will remember this moment for the rest of his life. This was the biggest piece of action I ever saw in World War II, he'll write years later. But something is different this time. They're not just near the battlefield. They're in it. On their way to set up the deception, patrols discover 15 destroyed American half-tracks, blasted apart by German anti-tank rockets. Bodies still inside, burned beyond recognition. Private Bob Tompkins writes in his diary that night, just beginning to realize how vulnerable we were. August 24th, 10:30 at night. The Sonic trucks move forward to within 200 meters of German lines. You could throw a grenade and hit German positions from where they're parked. They play tank sounds for 4 straight hours, every man knowing that if the Germans figure out the sounds are fake and locate the source, they're dead. Corporal Al Albrecht remembers, I remember looking out there and saying to myself, we're pretty close to the enemy. August 25th, 1 in the afternoon. The American attack begins. Tompkins watches from a hedgerow. Artillery raising hell, saw shells landing 400 yards in front of us, could hear machine guns, rifles, mortars going off like crazy, saw thunderbolts strafing German positions with rockets. They roared right over our heads. Then, disaster strikes. Company D of the 709th Tank Battalion, real tanks with real crews, attacks from positions near where the Ghost Army had set up their inflatable decoys. The Germans had zeroed their artillery on that exact spot. They'd been shelling it for hours, thinking it was full of American armor. 5 American tanks explode instantly, crews incinerated before they can even bail out. The tanks never even reached their attack positions. They just got decimated. The Ghost Army soldiers watch in absolute horror. Their deception worked too well. They drew so much enemy fire to that sector that when real American tanks attacked from the same direction, they drove straight into a death trap. Lieutenant Colonel Clifford Simonson writes in his after-action report, "This taught us the crucial importance of coordination with friendly forces. The wrong deception in the wrong place can kill your own men." 3 Ghost Army soldiers die at Brest. Dozens more are wounded. But they learned a lesson that day, a lesson written in American blood. Deception is a weapon, and like any weapon, it can kill friend or foe if you're not careful where you point it. September 15th, 1944. Luxembourg. General Patton has a catastrophic problem, and he knows it. His Third Army is attacking the fortress city of Metz, one of the most heavily defended positions in Europe. But his supply lines are stretched dangerously thin. There's a 25-mile gap in his defensive line along the Moselle River, a gaping hole in American defenses. Defending that entire 25-mile gap is 1 cavalry squadron, 760 men. That's it. If the Germans discover this weakness, they can cut through like a knife through butter and attack Patton's entire army from behind. The war in Europe could be set back by months. Tens of thousands of Americans could die. Patton writes to his wife that night, "There is one rather bad spot in my line, but I don't think the Huns know it. Hiding it now by the grace of God and a lot of guts." The grace of God he's referring to? The Ghost Army. The mission is as simple as it is impossible. Make 500 men look like 8,000, pretend to be the 6th Armored Division, one of Patton's best units. Hold the line for a few days until real reinforcements arrive. September 15th, 4 in the afternoon. The Ghost Army convoy rolls into woods near the town of Bettembourg, Luxembourg. They set up 12 inflatable tanks in positions visible from across the river. Paint 6th Armored Division markings on all their vehicles. Sew fake division patches on their uniforms. At 10 that night, sonic trucks play the sounds of an entire armored division moving into defensive positions. A cavalry colonel storms up to Lieutenant Dick Syracuse at midnight. "What the hell's going on? What are those tanks doing in my sector?" Syracuse tries to explain that there are no tanks, just recordings. "Don't tell me that. I know what I hear. That's tanks moving into position." If their own officers can't tell the difference, the Germans won't either. September 16th. Morning. Ghost Army soldiers wearing 6th Armored uniforms flood into Bettembourg's cafes and bars. They talk loudly about their division's plans where locals can overhear. Some of those locals might be German spies, or at least people who talk to Germans. Water trucks drive back and forth through town all day, as if supplying 8,000 men instead of 500. Civilians photograph their vehicle markings, take notes, ask questions, everything the Ghost Army wants them to do. Across the river, German reconnaissance spots what looks like the 6th Armored Division dug in along the Moselle. German command rushes reinforcements to counter the threat. The plan works. But there's a problem, a big problem. The real American reinforcements are delayed. The deception was supposed to last 48 hours. It stretches to 8 days. 8 days of holding a 25-mile gap with nothing but rubber tanks and recorded sounds. Every hour that passes increases the risk. German patrols probe the line constantly. Telephone wires get cut by infiltrators. Civilians report seeing German scouts in nearby woods at night. Sergeant Bob Tompkins writes in his diary on September 21st. German patrol reported 3 to 4 miles away. Civilians seem anxious about our setup. We should have moved out days ago, but attack seems imminent. Lieutenant Bob Conrad will remember thinking, "There was nothing between us and the Germans but our hopes and prayers." Finally, September 22nd, the 83rd Infantry Division arrives, real soldiers with real weapons to hold the line for real. As the Ghost Army pulls out, the sonic trucks play one final recording. the sounds of tanks leaving the area, maintaining the illusion to the very end. Captured German intelligence reports recovered after the war confirm it. They believed an entire armored division defended that sector for over a week. They never attacked because they thought they'd be facing overwhelming force. 500 men with rubber tanks held off the German army for 8 days. 0 casualties. Patton's line held. His attack on Metz succeeded, all because the Germans were shooting at ghosts. March 1945. The Rhine River, Germany's last natural defense before the heart of the Third Reich. The 9th United States Army plans to cross the Rhine at the town of Viersen, but German defenders on the east bank number over 100,000 soldiers. If they know exactly where the Americans are crossing, it will be a bloodbath. General William Simpson calls in the Ghost Army for their biggest, most elaborate deception operation of the entire war. The mission is elegant in its simplicity. Make the Germans think the 9th Army is crossing 10 miles south of the real location. March 18th through 24th, 1945. The Ghost Army stages the most complex illusion in military history. They position hundreds of inflatable tanks, trucks, and artillery pieces in fields visible from German observation posts across the river. Every piece is positioned perfectly, so German observers will see exactly what they're supposed to see. Sonic trucks play recordings 24 hours a day. Bridge building sounds, trucks moving supplies to forward positions, tank engines idling, waiting for the order to cross. The sounds never stop for 6 straight days and nights. Radio operators create an entire fake headquarters network, hundreds of fake transmissions about supply schedules, unit movements, and the upcoming assault, all designed to be intercepted by German signals intelligence. Engineers use bulldozers to create fake tank tracks and supply dumps leading to the false crossing point. From the air, from the ground, from every angle, it looks like the 9th Army is preparing to cross at the wrong location. Ghost Army soldiers wearing engineer uniforms gather in bars and cafes near the fake crossing site. They drink too much on purpose and talk too loudly about the big operation tomorrow, making sure every German spy in the area hears exactly what they want them to hear. March 23rd. Midnight. The real 9th Army begins crossing the Rhine at Viersen, 10 miles north of where the Germans are expecting them. German artillery opens fire with everything they have. Thousands of shells. The night sky lights up with explosions. But they're shelling the wrong place. The fake crossing site, empty fields where nobody is located. 0 American casualties from the bombardment because there's nobody there to hit. The real crossing at Viersen encounters surprisingly light resistance. The 9th Army establishes a solid bridgehead. Thousands of troops pour across the Rhine throughout the night. By the time German commanders realize they've been completely fooled, 50,000 American soldiers are already across the Rhine and advancing into Germany. General Simpson's official commendation states, "The 23rd Special Troops deception operations are estimated to have saved thousands of Allied lives in the Rhine crossings." One United States Army intelligence analyst will write years later, "Rarely, if ever, has there been a group of such a few men which had so great an influence on the outcome of a major military campaign. Total Ghost Army casualties in Operation Viersen, 0. German casualties from wasting ammunition, shelling empty fields, unknown. But thousands of artillery shells were fired at ghosts instead of real American soldiers. The Sonic Deception Unit, officially designated the 3132 Signal Service Company Special, had what many considered the most terrifying job in the entire Ghost Army. Their equipment was remarkable for 1944. Half-tracks mounted with massive 500-pound speaker arrays capable of projecting sound up to 15 miles away. Their recordings were the real thing. Actual tank units recorded at Fort Knox, Kentucky. Real engine sounds, real track clatter, real radio chatter, real commanders shouting real orders to real soldiers. But their position on the battlefield? That was the nightmare part. Often 200 to 300 meters from enemy lines, close enough that Germans could hear individual American voices if someone spoke too loudly. The process was simple in theory, but terrifying in practice. Park the half-track within sight of German positions, wait until full darkness, play recordings of tanks moving in, starting with the sound of one tank and gradually building to entire companies and battalions. Then sit there for hours, knowing German artillery could start firing at any moment, hope desperately that the Germans shoot at the sound instead of the source. Private Phil Delisante will remember, it was like being on the firing line every single night. The psychological effect on German soldiers was devastating. They would report hearing American tank columns moving at night, full divisions on the move. They'd call in artillery strikes on the sounds, shoot flares into the darkness, prepare defensive positions for attacks that never came. Some nights, the sonic crews would play the sounds of troops leaving an area, making Germans think a sector was now undefended and vulnerable. German units would probe forward carefully, expecting to find abandoned positions. They'd find nothing, get confused, pull back, never understanding what they'd actually encountered. Other nights, they'd play recordings of bridge construction for hours. Germans would shell empty riverbanks all night long, wasting ammunition on phantoms. The sonic unit participated in over 20 major operations throughout the war. 3 men were killed, dozens were wounded from German counter-battery fire when the Germans got lucky and shelled the right location. But they never stopped, because every German shell fired at a recording of a tank was a shell not fired at a real American soldier. Every hour of confusion they created was another hour for real American units to maneuver unopposed. While rubber tanks fooled enemy pilots overhead and sound trucks fooled enemy soldiers on the ground, the Signal Company Special fought a completely different war. The radio war. The invisible war. Their mission was to create fake radio networks so convincing that German signals intelligence operators would intercept them and believe they were real. The technique was called spoof radio, and it required incredible skill. Operators would study real military units' radio traffic for days. They'd learn each radio operator's unique fist, their personal Morse code rhythm. Every operator sends Morse code slightly differently, like a fingerprint. The Germans knew this. They tracked individual operators. So the Ghost Army would record a real unit's radio traffic for 24 hours, study each operator's patterns and rhythms and quirks. Then they'd move into position and start transmitting as that unit, even though the real unit had moved 50 miles away. German intelligence operators would intercept the fake transmissions, plot them on their maps, file reports stating enemy unit still located in previous sector. Meanwhile, the real unit would be attacking somewhere completely different. In December 1944, during the Battle of the Bulge, the Signal Company ran a pure radio deception called Operation Kodak. No rubber tanks, no sound trucks, just fake radio transmissions. They created an entire Phantom Corps headquarters out of thin air. Hundreds of messages transmitted every day. Supply requests, situation reports, movement orders, weather reports, everything a real Corps headquarters would transmit. German signals intelligence intercepted everything, tracked it carefully, allocated forces to counter this Phantom Corps. The Corps didn't exist. It never existed. But the German divisions defending against it were very real. And they weren't at Bastogne when the American counterattack broke through to relieve the encircled 101st Airborne Division. The radio operators never fired a single shot, never saw a German soldier face to face, but they helped relieve one of the most famous sieges in American military history by making the Germans defend against radio waves. The 603rd Engineer Camouflage Battalion consisted of 379 artists who specialized in visual deception. Before the war, they were painters, sculptors, set designers for Broadway shows, fashion design students, art teachers, commercial illustrators. During the war, they became industrial-scale manufacturers of convincing lies. Their factory section operated like an assembly line, mass-producing everything needed to make a fake division look real. Fake unit patches by the thousands, fake vehicle markings by the hundreds. Fake road signs pointing to fake headquarters buildings, fake unit newspapers, even fake personnel rosters in case someone got captured and the Germans searched their pockets. They painted inflatable tanks with authentic weathering, mud spatters in exactly the right places, scratches where crews would naturally bump the armor, oil stains under the engine compartments. From 200 yards away, even experienced tank commanders with binoculars couldn't tell the difference between their fakes and the real thing. They studied camouflage patterns used by real armored units. Then, they deliberately camouflaged their fakes badly. just badly enough so German aerial reconnaissance would spot them. The perfect deception. Making the enemy think they've discovered something you've hidden when the whole point was for them to find it. Bill Blass, the future fashion designer who would dress first ladies and Hollywood stars, spent 1944 and 45 sewing fake division patches in a tent in France. Ellsworth Kelly, who would become one of the most famous abstract painters in American history, spent the war painting realistic mud on rubber tanks. Years later, Kelly said in an interview, "We were creating art, just art that was meant to deceive rather than inspire, but it was still art." The 603rd participated in every single Ghost Army operation. 0 members were killed by enemy action during the entire war. Their art saved thousands of lives. December 1944. The Ardennes Forest. Hitler launches Germany's last major offensive of the war. 30 German divisions smash into thinly defended American lines. They create a 50-mile deep bulge in Allied defenses. They surround the 101st Airborne Division at the town of Bastogne. Patton's Third Army races north to relieve Bastogne, but to do it, he has to pull units from his southern defensive positions, leaving gaps, dangerous gaps. If the Germans discover these gaps, they can exploit them. Trap Patton's relief force, turn the Battle of the Bulge into an even bigger disaster. The Ghost Army receives a mission unlike any they've had before. Operation Kodak. Create 2 Phantom divisions in Patton's vacated positions using radio deception only. No rubber tanks this time, no sound trucks, just radio waves and lies. December 26th through 29th. Signal company operators work around the clock broadcasting hundreds of fake radio messages. Supply convoy delayed by snow. Request priority delivery. Enemy patrol spotted at grid coordinates 547-293. Investigating now. Artillery battery establishing firing positions. Will be ready by 0600 hours. German signals intelligence intercepts everything. Plots, American units on their situation maps, files, reports to headquarters. Wehrmacht commanders look at the intelligence summaries and see that Patton's southern flank appears to still be fully defended. They decide they cannot exploit those sectors. Too risky. They're looking at phantoms, radio ghosts, but they don't know that. December 26th. Patton's real army smashes into the German forces surrounding Bastogne, breaks through the encirclement, relieves the 101st Airborne. The southern flank is never attacked. German forces never probed those sectors because their intelligence told them American divisions were dug in there. By radio waves alone, transmitted from trucks parked in empty fields, the Ghost Army convinced the German High Command that entire American divisions existed in places where there was nothing but snow and trees. Cost of operation. Kodak, $0 in equipment, 0 casualties. Result, helped turn the tide of Germany's last major offensive in the West, June 1944 through May 1945. The Ghost Army conducted 21 major deception operations across France, Belgium, Luxembourg, and Germany. They impersonated 13 different American divisions. They created the illusion of 30,000 soldiers who never existed. They drew enemy forces away from real operations. They protected undermanned defensive sectors. They deceived German intelligence consistently for 11 months straight. But deception always has a price. 3 Ghost Army soldiers were killed in action during the war. Dozens more were wounded. Some suffered injuries that affected them for the rest of their lives. Others suffered psychological trauma that nobody understood at the time, spending months living as other people, lying to everyone they met, never able to tell even their families what they actually did during the war. After the war ended, the entire Ghost Army operation was classified top secret. It remained classified until 1996, 51 years after the war ended. That meant these veterans couldn't tell their children what they'd done, couldn't tell their grandchildren, couldn't tell anyone. Bill Blass became one of America's most famous fashion designers. He dressed first ladies and Hollywood stars. He almost never mentioned the Ghost Army. Most people who knew him had no idea. Ellsworth Kelly became a world-famous abstract painter. His works hang in major museums. He rarely discussed his war service in detail. Art Kane photographed the Beatles, Bob Dylan, Jim Morrison, and countless other cultural icons. Very few people knew he'd once specialized in photographing inflatable tanks positioned to deceive German reconnaissance. Some veterans struggled with the ethics of what they'd done. They'd saved American lives through deception, but deception meant lying, trickery. Was that honorable for a soldier? Lieutenant Colonel Clifford Simonson addressed this question in an interview years later. We asked ourselves many times during the war, is trickery a soldier's virtue? Then we remembered something simple. Every enemy shell fired at a rubber tank was a shell not fired at our brothers. Every German division chasing ghosts was a division not killing Americans. We were soldiers. We did our duty. We just did it with imagination instead of bullets. When the classification finally ended in 1996, the surviving veterans could finally tell their stories. By then, most of them were in their 70s and 80s. Some had already died, never having been able to share what they'd accomplished. But those who lived long enough to tell their stories had one consistent message. We proved that creativity can be as powerful as firepower. That 1,100 artists with rubber tanks and sound recordings could genuinely change the course of the largest war in human history. May 8, 1945. Germany surrenders unconditionally. World War II in Europe is over. In the months that follow, United States Army intelligence analysts study the Ghost Army's operations carefully. They interview captured German officers. They examine German intelligence reports and situation maps. They analyze the decisions German commanders made based on false information. One analyst's conclusion appears in an official report. The 23rd Headquarters Special Troops deception operations are estimated to have saved between 15,000 and 30,000 American lives. How did they reach that number? By calculating what would have happened without the deceptions. German forces concentrated at the real Rhine crossing points instead of fake ones. German divisions attacking Patton's actual weak points instead of phantom strong points. German artillery shelling real troop concentrations instead of empty fields. The mathematics of the Ghost Army are remarkable. Total Ghost Army personnel, 1,100 men. Total German forces deceived at various times, estimated at over 100,000 soldiers. Cost of one inflatable tank, $85. Cost of one real Sherman tank, $45,000. American lives saved, 15,000 to 30,000 estimated. The Ghost Army proved something that seemed impossible in 1943. In modern warfare, perception can be more valuable than reality. The enemy's belief about where you are can matter more than where you actually are. What they think you're doing can be more important than what you're actually doing. Their tactics influenced military deception operations for decades afterward. During the Korean War, United Nations forces used inflatable decoys to draw enemy fire. Throughout the Cold War, NATO practiced large-scale deception operations based directly on Ghost Army techniques. During the Gulf War in 1991, coalition forces deployed fake equipment arrays to draw Iraqi artillery fire away from real positions. In modern conflicts, electronic warfare creates what some call cyber ghosts. Fake signals, fake communications, fake radar signatures, the descendants of rubber tanks. The inflatable tanks themselves, the ones that survived the war, are now in museums. The National World War II Museum in New Orleans has several on display. The Fort Benning Museum in Georgia has more. The Imperial War Museum in London has examples in their collection. In 2022, the United States Congress awarded the Ghost Army the Congressional Gold Medal, one of the highest civilian honors America can bestow. By then, only 10 veterans were still alive to receive it. They were all in their late 90s. Several were too ill to attend the ceremony in person. The last time all the surviving members gathered together, one of them was asked what he wanted people to remember about the Ghost Army. He thought for a long moment, then said, "We were just artists who became soldiers. We never wanted to kill anyone. So we found a way to win battles without firing shots. We saved lives by creating lies. And I think, at the end of the day, that's something to be proud of." In 1944, a general looked at a deflated pile of rubber on a warehouse floor and laughed. "This is your secret weapon?" "Yes. And it helped win World War II. Because sometimes the best way to defeat an army isn't to destroy it, it's to deceive it. to make them see what isn't there, to make them fear what doesn't exist, to make them waste their strength fighting shadows. 1,100 artists with rubber tanks and sound recordings and radio transmissions never fired a shot in anger. But they saved 30,000 lives. They were the Ghost Army. The men who taught the world that in war, imagination can be deadlier than ammunition. That creativity can save more lives than firepower. That sometimes the most powerful weapon isn't the one that kills the most enemies. It's the one that makes them shoot at nothing while your real forces win the war. And that's why the Germans never ever mocked inflatable tanks again.